Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
The smell of butter and grilled rosemary had soaked into everything. My clothes, the couch cushions, even Alice's hair. I was hunched over my laptop at the chip table, proofreading a column on ammonia poisoning for a health blog that paid in gas money. Alice stepped out on the little iron balcony wrapped in her mother's lavender shawl, the same one Rose used to wear on hospital night shifts. She said it still smelled like her. I didn't argue. "Just a few minutes," I told her. "It's past 10. She nodded and stepped outside, soft feet on metal slats, arms tucked into the shawl like a cape. She'd just turned 8 that day. I still hadn't cleaned the birthday cake plates. "Before we start, share in the comments. How's your day going and where are you joining from? And let's continue." Then the hallway bell rang. It was late for visitors. I glanced at the door, then heard Alice call, tight, urgent. "Dad, her necklace. It's like Mom's picture. She's sick." I was up and moving before she finished. Alice stood in the open doorway, her arm pointed at a woman bent over herself, holding the wall with one hand and her stomach with the other. Mid-30s, good coat, heels, but pale as a bedsheet and sweating through her lipstick. She didn't speak, just bolted past me to the bathroom and dropped to her knees. I followed, already reaching for my kit. She gagged, heaved once, and threw up nothing but water and fear. "Garlic and metal," she said, barely audible, leaning on the toilet tank. "It smells like garlic and metal." I went cold. Those words were burned into my skull. "You wear jewelry?" I asked, squatting next to her. She touched her neck like she forgot it was there. A necklace, thin chain, silver tone, heavy pendant. I knew it the second I saw it. Floral metalwork, faint shimmer of crystal dust. The same cold glitter from my wedding photo, the one Rose wore the day she collapsed. I forced my breath down, kept my hands steady. "We're taking this off." I put on nitrile gloves, unclasped it without brushing her skin, and dropped the thing into a sample bag from my trauma kit. It clinked against the plastic like a snake's fang. She stared at me like I was from another planet. "I think your necklace is making you sick." She nodded, dazed. "My husband gave it to me tonight. 7 years married. He wanted to celebrate. Took me out downstairs. I felt dizzy right after dessert." I grabbed activated charcoal, calculated by weight, had her sip it with water, kept her on her side. Her pupils were sluggish but equal. Her hands shook. Her color was off. I got her on oxygen and called 911. Alice stood in the hallway, gripping the doorframe with both hands. Her face didn't twist or cry. She just waited. That kid's got granite in her bones. "What's your name?" I asked the woman. "Stella," she croaked. "Stella Hale." I glanced at the necklace in the bag, then the bookshelf, the photo, Rose's bare shoulders, the chain shining at her throat. "That necklace took your mom," I'd once whispered to Alice when the grief boiled over. I didn't say it out loud now, but I felt it like a pulse behind my eyes. The paramedics arrived fast. I gave them everything: symptoms, vitals, dose, timing, and handed over Stella on a soft stretcher. I kept the necklace in my pocket. I wasn't about to lose the only proof I'd ever had. Not this time. I rode down the stairs with the medics, boots echoing, my free hand on the banister. When we hit the sidewalk, I looked up. Alice was still on the balcony, arms wrapped in that lavender shawl, watching for me like a lighthouse. I nodded. She nodded back. We didn't have to say anything. We've been a 2-person fire team since she was 3. I pulled out my phone and called the only man I trusted to believe me. "Detective Nelson," I said when he picked up. "It's back. I've got it in my hand. The thing that killed Rose just walked back into our house." Nelson didn't say much when I made the call, just breathed into the line for a second and said, "Hold it. I'm coming." While the sirens faded down the block, I stood on the sidewalk outside our door with that sealed plastic bag burning a hole in my pocket. My hands didn't shake, but my jaw did. I've known a few kinds of anger in my life. Slow burn, red flash, the kind that makes you breathe deeper so you don't snap something. But this was the cold kind, the kind that makes your memory sharper, not blurrier. You should know who Rose was. She was the kind of woman who didn't need a spotlight. She walked through hospital chaos like it was a library, never rushing, never barking orders, just present. I met her during our emergency rotations. She'd correct a dosage without making anyone feel small. She listened to patients even when the chart screamed, "frequent flyer." I watched her calm a drunk who thought he was on a spaceship just by holding his hand. We were kids when Alice came. I'm talking no savings, bad furniture, an apartment with 1 fan and 3 locks. But we made it work. Rose didn't panic. She planned. We finished our licensing with Alice screaming in the next room while we studied dosage conversions and trauma protocol. I was 26. Rose was 24. The professor said we were reckless. Then he held Alice for the first time and cleared a shelf for her toys. Joseph's apartment was our safe zone. Upstairs from the bistro, noisy as rush hour, but the walls were thick and the rent was 0. His lease was a state-awarded research tenancy, city university work, long-term material testing for transportation infrastructure. The kind of thing nobody reads about unless a bridge collapses. Legally, he couldn't be forced out. And because of succession rules in this city, Rose was already on the lease. When Joseph passed, it became ours. Troy Coleman hated that fact more than anything. He owned the bistro and the bars chained to it. Big man, big smile, expensive shoes that didn't touch sidewalk grime. He came upstairs one day with a proposal folder and a bottle of whiskey he didn't even bother to open. Said the market was hot, and it was time for the professor to monetize his legacy. Joseph stared at him for maybe 10 full seconds before he answered. He said, "I earned this lease with blood and brain matter, not for flipping. Get off my landing." Troy left, still smiling, like the conversation had gone his way. But that smile didn't reach his eyes. The wedding wasn't fancy. Small room, good food, real friends. Rose wore a lace dress her mother left in a cedar chest, neck bare except for the little freckle near her collarbone. Tiana showed up late with a bottle of champagne she didn't pay for and a tone like she owned the air. Tiana was one of those people who never left fully. Med school hanger-on, party ghost, rich girl with long opinions and short memory. She had this way of stepping in just when no one asked, rearranging hair, tightening buttons, snapping jewelry shut like she'd been hired for it. I remember turning around near the end of the night and seeing Rose touch her throat. She said, "Smells weird, like garlic." I said, "There's no garlic dish here." Then she blinked, and her body went slack in my arms. I caught her before she hit the floor. By the time I got my phone out and called it in, there were people already crowding around. Some of them helped. Most just stared. The necklace, I didn't even realize it had been on her until it wasn't. 1 minute it was there. The next, gone. Nobody saw who took it. Nobody admitted anything. We got her to the hospital. I stayed by the crash cart as long as they let me. But she never opened her eyes again. The autopsy was useless. Acute toxic reaction. Undetermined origin. That's how they closed it. No poison in her stomach. No clear ingestion. Nothing to hold. Joseph never got over it. He went quiet after the funeral. Sat in his chair by the radiator and stared out the window like he was waiting for someone to knock with the truth. 6 months later, I found him cold in his chair, with Alice's drawing still pinned to the fridge. He'd stopped eating. Just stopped. I didn't have the luxury to fall apart. Alice was 3. I was 32. I got up every morning and made eggs and held umbrellas and carried her down the steps, while people in the bistro laughed and clinked glasses under us. I put our wedding photo on the shelf because Alice kept asking where Mommy went. She'd press her hand against the glass and say, "She's smiling. That means she's coming back." I told her the necklace took Mommy. I told Detective Nelson the same thing. Nelson didn't laugh, didn't pat my shoulder. He said, "Walk me through it." He worked the case harder than I expected. pushed the talk screens, ran down every last guest, even tried to tie Troy to an earlier licensing scandal, the kind that killed a bar's fire inspection and got people hurt. But the lab had nothing, and memory fades fast in a room full of drinks. After 3 months, the file got thinner. After 6, it got shelved. Tiana disappeared for a while. Traveling for work? Europe, she said. Then she came back with a Paris tan and a ring she didn't wear at the wedding. She never mentioned Rose, just reinserted herself like nothing had happened. Same voice, same heels, same knack for being helpful enough to linger. I didn't confront her. Some things you sit with until the clock brings them back around. Later, when lawyers got involved and statements were read aloud in bland little rooms with flickering fluorescents, I started piecing it all together. The dress, the smell, the missing chain. The moment Rose leaned into me and sagged like her skeleton had gone soft. I didn't see everything, but I remember enough. I remember the sound she made, that soft exhale like something left her. I walked into the precinct the next morning carrying a sealed freezer bag inside a second bag. Gloves on, face locked. The building smelled like paper and dry coffee, same as always. Nelson met me in the lobby with a half-full cup and a deadpan look. "You really brought me a present," he said. "It bites," I told him. We logged it by the book. Chain of custody, timestamp, bag seal. The desk printer sounded like a dying bird while it spit out my typed statement. I signed the seal. Nelson countersigned the log. The necklace went into evidence under a rush tag, flagged for toxicological priority. He held it up once, eyes scanning the metal through the plastic. "You sure this is what you think it is?" "I'm sure," I said. "I never forget a thing that ruins me." He gave a single nod, no pushback. We didn't wait. First stop was the bistro. Hostess was new, 20-something, heavy eyeliner. Name tag said Jules. Nelson showed her a badge and said, "Anniversary couple. Woman left sick. What do you remember?" She glanced toward the dining room like someone might correct her answer. Then she said, "Pretty couple. She had one of those gold chain pearl drop deals. Looked expensive. She went out for air after dessert. He said she'd meet him at home and paid the check." "He say where he was going?" "He said he'd talk to the owner," she shrugged. "Then he left. Calm." I've seen calmer people hyperventilating into a paper bag. We didn't bother waiting around. Nelson got behind the wheel of an unmarked unit and drove to Troy Coleman's house out in the leafy burbs, a 3-car garage, lawn like a golf course, hedges trimmed to the nub. There was a stone eagle on the mailbox, which told me everything I needed to know. I waited at the curb while Nelson in a uniform walked up the flagstone path. I didn't hear the conversation until I saw the porch cam later. Troy opening the door in a robe, drink already poured at 10 in the morning, asking if they wanted something before we talk. Inside, Nelson read every question like a menu item. Simple, slow, methodical. "What time did you leave the restaurant?" "I was home by 9:30, Troy said. "Didn't feel like staying." "Know the Hales well?" "Just clients. I've met him at events. Can't say I know the wife." Nelson asked about cameras. Troy said they were getting repaired. Later we'd pull that camera footage from off-site backups. Turns out the system was just fine. His alibi crumbled under the first flashlight. Back at the precinct, we ran the name off Stella's reservation. Stella Hale. Reservation confirmed by card. Timestamp matched the window of exposure. Nelson skimmed the slip and muttered, "There's our second track." He didn't smile, but I saw his jaw set. Same look I saw when we buried Rose. He'd carried that failure for years. He wasn't about to carry another. By the time I got back to the apartment, the hallway smelled like someone had burned toast. Ms. Delgado from 3C stood outside my door, waving a bright red folder like a torch. "Stanley," she said, "we're filing another petition against hotel conversion. Bad actors trying to turn this into a short-term rental circus." She opened the folder. 43 signatures. Real names, real addresses. Her voice got lower. "I want you to speak at the hearing," she said. "You've got the story people remember." I said yes. Didn't even hesitate. That piece of paper bought us time. When a zoning petition hits City Hall with enough signatures and a recognizable face, permits freeze. Inspectors get nervous. Press shows up. Cameras make developers sweat. And more importantly, it gave Nelson cover to file for a lab rush he otherwise wouldn't have gotten approved. Public pressure makes bureaucracy move faster than facts. Later that day, I got a call from the hospital. Stella was stable. Intravenous fluids, steady vitals, under observation. They said she was lucid and asking for water. I took Alice to see her. The hospital hallway smelled like rubbing alcohol and cafeteria pizza. Alice held a paper flower she'd made that morning. Stella sat upright, pale but clear-eyed, ring still on her hand like armor. When she saw Alice, she smiled like she meant it. "You saved me," Stella said. "You're a real hero." Alice went pink and quiet. Then she said, "I just yelled. He did everything else." Stella looked at me and said thank you. She didn't say it like a throwaway. She said it like it cost something. On the way out, Alice asked, "Is she going to be okay?" I said, "She's tougher than she looks." She said, "Like Mom?" That one landed in my chest. When we got home, I opened the professor's old file cabinet. Top drawer, left side. Pulled out the evidence box. I put the chain of custody slip inside, along with the printed photos of the necklace. Next to it sat the shawl folded like linen for a funeral, and Joseph's pension paperwork, still stamped with the state seal. I've made shrines before. This one had a job to do. That night, after Alice went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through the registration info from the card Stella used at the restaurant. Nelson had emailed the document with a single subject line, Braxton Hale. Rare car broker, New Jersey-based, website full of flash and no contact phone number, socials full of vintage Ferraris and cigar bars, the kind of man who always had more charm than credit. Attached was a second line of text. Deep debt. Owes people you don't want to owe. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because it shocked me. It didn't. It didn't surprise me that Braxton ran, only that he waited until daylight to do it. Nelson texted me a photo of him from the street cam outside his condo. A black sport utility vehicle backed up to the curb, 2 duffel bags, head down, phone clamped between his ear and shoulder like he was trying to negotiate his way out of gravity. By noon, Nelson and 2 uniforms caught him mid-load. Nelson told me later that Braxton didn't fight. He said, "I'm just going on a business trip," and held up a boarding pass screenshot on his phone. Nelson checked the timestamp. It was dated yesterday. That stupidity told me something important. Braxton wasn't a planner. He was a reactor. A man who thought charm could outrun consequences. Men like that crumble fast when the room shrinks and the lights buzz. I didn't see the interview live. I read it later from the transcript and Nelson's notes. The interrogation room was nothing dramatic. Metal table, cold chairs, coffee stains on tile, fluorescent hum. Nelson sat across from Braxton and started soft. No raised voice, no threats, just questions that felt like pressure without being loud. "Where were you headed with the bags?" "Jersey," Braxton said. "Work." "Why did you send your wife out for air and then leave without her?" "I thought she went home." Nelson let silence hang. That silence is a tool. Eventually, Braxton cracked. He started talking about gambling, poker rooms in Jersey where the buy-in is rent money, a private craps game in a basement in Queens, and a bridge loan supposedly for business expenses that came in at 28% interest. He said it like it surprised him, like debt grows on a man the way mold does. Quiet, slow, then everywhere. When he said he used his wife's assets as collateral, I felt my throat tighten. That's a kind of betrayal that hides behind paperwork. It doesn't scream. It just drains someone. Nelson didn't react. He just asked, "Who gave you the loan?" Braxton swallowed so loud the mic caught it. "I went to a friend, Troy. You asked him for money." "Yeah, I needed a bridge. I was out of runway." "And he offered help?" "Kind of." Nelson leaned back. "How kind?" Braxton pulled at his hair and said, "He told me I had a problem that needed solving. He handed me a necklace in a velvet roll, told me not to touch certain parts, said it would do the job and leave no trace." Hearing it in text didn't soften it. If anything, the language made it colder. Planned, deliberate, packaged like a product. Not rage, not impulse, strategy. Braxton didn't say kill. He didn't need to. He said, "He told me to give it to her on our anniversary. Told me it would be quick." I stopped reading for a minute. Just stared at the sentence. I'd seen death before. Combat, car wreck, overdose. But it hits different when it's dressed up to look like luxury. The lab would eventually tell us exactly where the toxin lived. Micro pockets in varnish layered on the inner prongs and clasp. But I already knew the shape of the story. A beautiful thing turned lethal, delivered like jewelry, worn willingly. Nelson didn't stop there. The warrants went out the same afternoon. Troy's office, Troy's restaurant office, and the one that made my spine go tight. The business address belonging to Tiana Merritt. I'd known Tiana had her claws near the wedding, but seeing her name on an evidence request put reality under a microscope. Nelson and a couple detectives hit her showroom. White walls, glass cases, lighting so soft you'd think diamonds healed cancer. She acted surprised when they showed up. She said words like, "Of course, officer," and "Let me help you find anything you need," with her voice balanced perfectly between offended and innocent. I wasn't there, but I know that pose. I've seen people hide behind politeness the same way others hide behind fists. Her paperwork was neat. Receipts, appraisals, certificates. She had provenance on everything visible. Even her desk drawers were staged like a magazine shoot. But neat doesn't mean clean. The inventory from the search came through that night. One line mattered. 2 earrings, floral metal, matching design, period consistent, no surface treatment detected. A pair. Same artisan, same era, same fine metalwork. Pristine, untouched, clean. The lab techs labeled them control pieces. That changed everything. If the earrings were clean and the necklace wasn't, then the necklace had been altered later. Not manufactured toxic. Modified. Intentionally. That meant timeline. That meant someone took something safe and painted death onto it. And they had to do it after acquisition. That's not a mystery. That's a window in time with fingerprints all over it. Tiana lawyered up within hours. She didn't give an interview. She didn't shed a tear. She let her attorney speak for her in a tone that tried to make police look rude, just for asking questions. She claimed she sourced both necklace and earrings from a private collection out of Hartford roughly 8 months before Rose's wedding. She claimed she styled the necklace onto Rose during the reception as a courtesy. She claimed she never knew anything about toxins. Nelson wasn't buying the act. He asked why she purchased a case of artist's varnish with metallic binders, along with a jar of a restricted mineral pigment used in conservation roughly 6 weeks before the wedding, billed through a shell company that didn't exist 3 months earlier. Her attorney said, "We will address that at a later date," in a voice that belonged in a courtroom, not an interrogation room. When the lab results came in later, that purchase stopped being coincidence. It became a line item in a homicide plan. You don't buy restoration varnish and metal binding pigment unless you intend to coat something delicate and permanent. I wasn't in the room for that conversation. I didn't see Tiana fold or posture or pretend she was surprised. I learned it from discovery months later, sitting at my kitchen table with a yellow highlighter and my shoes off, because I couldn't bring that ugliness into the bedroom where my kid sleeps. I marked every page that matched what I lived through. I circled every date that hit the month before the wedding. I underlined every time someone said unknown agent, or acute reaction, or contact surface. At one point, I realized my jaw hurt from clenching. There's a specific kind of rage that comes with confirmation, the kind that doesn't explode, the kind that settles low, heavy, patient. Nelson called me around midnight, voice worn down. "We got more than we thought," he said. "This isn't sloppy. This is engineered." I said, "Tell me when you're ready for me to look someone in the eye." He said, We're getting there. I turned off the kitchen light, walked to Alice's room, and stood in the doorway while she slept. She looked peaceful, hand curled under her cheek, hair tangled over the pillow. I wanted her to stay in a world where pretty things didn't hurt you. I knew that wasn't how this worked. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the kitchen, lights low, window cracked, waiting for something. Maybe my mind to stop replaying Braxton's voice. Maybe the silence to quit sounding like warning. Around 5, I made coffee, wrote down everything I could remember, then walked to the hospital with a paper cup and a granola bar. Stella was walking the hallway, slow but steady, hand gripping the rail like a climber. Her hair was flat from the pillow, but her spine was straight. She looked at me, nodded once, and said, "Is that real coffee?" I handed it over and said, "Black. No frills. Sorry about the cup." She sipped it like it was gold. Then she leaned on the doorway and whispered, "Tell me." "You were targeted," I said. It wasn't random. He meant to do it. Her face didn't twist. It hardened. Her eyes went glassy for a second, then locked on. She nodded once, jaw tight. Then she said, "I knew something was wrong. Braxton's been nervy for months. Late calls, secret meetings, a whole story about consigning a 1964 Alfa Romeo that didn't exist." "You thought he was cheating?" "I thought he was stupid," she said. "I didn't think he'd try to erase me." I didn't have anything soft to give her. I just sat on the bench outside the room and let her breathe. Alice came with me later that afternoon. She wore her favorite jeans with stars on the knees and carried a book she never actually read, just liked holding. Stella smiled when she saw her. "Thank you," she said. "You're the reason I'm here." Alice blushed. Then she said, dead serious, "When I grow up, I'll go to space and knock rocks away so they don't hit Earth." Stella laughed. Not the kind of laugh you fake to make a kid feel better. The kind that means you remembered you still had a laugh inside you. I stood by the door and watched the two of them talk. Sometimes kids know more about safe people than we do. I didn't explain that to Alice. I just let her feel it. That week I pulled 3 ambulance shifts. One call on a chef who melted his arm trying to flambe tequila, and one on a college kid who fainted from eating nothing but protein bars and ambition. In the back of the rig, between runs, I worked on an article called Hidden Poisons in Vintage Jewelry. I stripped the names, tightened the facts, linked to the best tox reports and case studies I could find, posted it under a pen name. I wasn't trying to go viral. I was trying to be useful. But the thing spun faster than I expected. It showed up on a collector's forum, got mentioned in a morning segment on local radio, even got quoted in a safety bulletin from a mid-tier auction house. None of that was revenge. It was just fire prevention. The attention brought heat. Cameras showed up outside the restaurant. Some guy with a long lens camped across the street from our building for half a day. That wasn't the part that mattered, though. What mattered was Ms. Delgado knocking again, red folder in hand, clipboard tucked under her arm. "We're holding a building meeting," she said. "Lobby, 7 o'clock. You're coming." She wasn't asking. We passed around dry pastries and bad coffee in paper cups. Folding chairs creaked. The talk was zoning, permits, and the damage Troy was planning. I raised my hand halfway through and said I'd speak at the hearing. Didn't even look at Alice. She already knew. The next morning, Stella texted me from her hospital room. "I'll cover your printing costs. Don't hold back." The hearing was packed. 20-something neighbors. Some brought poster boards. Some wore stickers that said, "No hotel." I stood behind a microphone and talked for 3 minutes about ambulance access, emergency egress, and how a hotel would strangle our block. A reporter with a bob cut and serious eyes asked, "Is this personal?" I said, "Every home is personal." "So yeah, it is." She blinked and scribbled like I'd handed her a headline. That same night, someone slid an envelope under our apartment door. Plain white, no name. Inside, $5,000 in 50s. And a note, typed, no signature. "Let it rest. For your daughter. I didn't speak, just stared at the bills like they were wet. Alice walked in from brushing her teeth and said, "Is that a birthday present?" I said no and told her to go get her socks. I didn't want her near it. I called Nelson, who came over with gloves, evidence bags, and a camera. We dusted it, tagged it, and sealed it up. Nelson looked at the envelope and said, "Not her style. This is back office muscle." He was right. Tiana's threats would have come with signatures and scented paper. This was something lower, grease and gristle. The kind of threat that wears a janitor badge and carries a burner phone. Stella called me later that night. She didn't ask if I was okay. She asked if I felt safe. I told her the truth. I'm always safe. I was taught how. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "And Alice?" I said, "She sleeps with the lavender shawl next to her. I keep the doors locked. I sit with my back to the wall. I watch the street when I come home. I walk quiet. I don't forget." She said, "That's not the same as being safe." "I know," I told her, "but it's what we've got right now." She didn't push it. Alice still asked about her mom some nights, sometimes out of nowhere. Once while pouring cereal, once while brushing her doll's hair. I never fed her lies. I told her the truth, in pieces, age-appropriate. That night she fell asleep with the shawl curled around her pillow like a lifeline. I stood in the doorway watching her chest rise slow and steady. Then I turned out the light, stepped into the kitchen, and refolded the shawl we kept on the shelf. One to sleep with, one to keep sacred. It was a ritual now. I never said that out loud, but my hands knew what they were doing. I don't believe in talismans. I believe in evidence, but I still fold that cloth careful, every time, like it matters. Dr. Klein looked like she'd been living on vending machine coffee and fluorescent light. Her badge clipped crooked, lab coat half-buttoned, hair tied up like it lost the battle. But when she spoke, it was like turning on a clean motor. "We'll start with SEM, scanning electron microscopy, get a surface map," she said. "Then XRF for elemental data, then surface swabs for contaminants. We're also running a binder analysis on the contact points, clasp, chain links, pendant mounts." I nodded. "Just tell me what matters when it lands." She gave me a look that said she understood I wasn't here for a science lesson. I was here for proof. She tapped the sealed necklace bag once with her pen, then looked at the earrings. "You sure these were meant to match?" "Same pattern," I said. "Same set. The necklace was worn." "The earrings weren't," she said. "That might save you more than you know." The prelim came back 3 days later. Nelson called me just past midnight. "You awake?" I said. "Don't ask dumb questions." He grunted. "The necklace is hot. Arsenic sulfide crystals in the varnish. It's layered on contact points, where the metal touches skin." I said nothing. I didn't need to. He knew what this meant. The full binder landed 2 weeks later, wrapped in a manila folder thick enough to choke a mailbox. Dr. Klein walked me through it page by page. I'm not a chemist, but I've been around enough labs to keep up when someone lays it out straight. She pointed to the SEM images first, high-resolution surface scans. The floral metal on the necklace had these tiny pits and pockets along the clasp, the pendant hinges, and every link of the chain. Under magnification, those pits weren't just wear, they were containers. "Arsenic sulfide," she said, crystallized and locked into a thin varnish layer. Very old-school poison, modern application. I asked, "How does that hit the body?" She pointed to the prong data. "It's the resin," she said. "When someone wears this, especially on warm skin, the sweat dissolves the outer film just enough to transfer trace amounts of the arsenic into microabrasions. Cuts, pores, tiny breaks in skin. It enters the bloodstream faster than it should." "And the heat from a crowd?" I asked. "Accelerates absorption. Think of it like steam in a closed room. It pushes the compound through faster." Then she showed me the control samples. The earrings, same alloy, same period-matching impurities, Same micro scratches on the tooling, but no arsenic, no varnish, no residue. Clean. That's what nails this, she said. You've got a baseline. Same maker, same composition, different treatment. So somebody took a clean piece and turned it lethal. Surgical, planned, deliberate. She turned to the varnish analysis. Binder components matched a product sold only through niche art conservation catalogs, used to coat old wood, frescoes, and metals in museum settings. It's stable under display conditions. Under sweat and friction, it's a delivery system. There's a fingerprint, she said. Not literal, but chemical. The solvent ratio is off-market. You don't get that by accident. It's like a recipe. Tiana's purchase history, pulled from business accounts tied to her showroom, showed that exact line item. Same resin, same pigment additive. Ordered 6 weeks before my wedding in a bulk quantity more suited to a restoration studio than jewelry prep. Klein closed the file and said, "You're not dealing with random poison. You're dealing with someone who knew exactly what to apply and where." I handed her a second sample. She raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Fiber from the lavender shawl," I said. "The one Rose wore that night." She opened the bag, clipped a swatch under a lens, and started running quick surface tests while I waited. After 10 minutes, she pulled off her gloves and said, "There's residue here. Same varnish. The necklace bled." That's when it all locked into place. The shawl had been on the top shelf of our hall closet for years. I found that sample last winter while switching out coats. Saw a yellowish edge near the collar and cut a few fibers. I didn't analyze it. I just bagged it and kept it with the professor's papers. I gave it to Nelson 2 weeks ago without much of a speech. Just said, "Might matter." He took it and said, "You have a knack for keeping evidence without knowing it." Tiana's lawyer tried to run interference. "She works with antique jewelry," the guy said. "Arsenic occurs naturally in older alloys." Dr. Klein didn't even blink. She just slid a table across the table that showed elemental ratios in known 18th century metals versus modern synthetic exposure. "This isn't ambient arsenic," she said. "This is industrial grade, modern processed, intentionally applied. The varnish is commercially traceable," she added. "The chemistry didn't exist back then. It exists now, in shipments Tiana signed for." Nelson presented the lab work to the grand jury so plainly that no one could look away. The photos, the solvent ratios, the order receipts, the earrings as control, the necklace as weapon. One neat row of dominoes from source to skin. "You don't need a fingerprint on the clasp," he told them. "You've got fingerprints in 4 rooms." That night I sat at the kitchen table with the lab report open, just reading it to myself like a sworn affidavit. Not crying, not shaking, just reading. The page with the microstructure of the clasp made me stop cold, like staring at a machine that was never meant to be beautiful, only precise. It's a strange kind of peace when the truth you've been screaming finally shows up dressed like science. You don't get closure, but you get the shape of the thing that took everything. The next morning, the DA's office reached out to Tiana's attorney with an offer. Name who planned it, hand over the chain of communication, plead down to something survivable, or ride this to trial and take it all. She asked for a meeting. I wasn't in that room, but I heard what the offer boiled down to. Limited charges in exchange for names, emails, receipts, and the original request that kicked this off. Cooperate or go down for the whole thing yourself. She folded. Not fast, but eventually. Nelson told me one detail that stuck like a tack behind the eye. Within 24 hours of Rose's collapse, Tiana returned the necklace to Troy's office safe. That was verified by a building access log, her swipe card, time-stamped, and a still frame from an off-site backup Troy swore had been erased. He lied. It hadn't been. And just like that, the camera saw the hand on the doorknob. After that, things started moving on their own. The zoning board pushed Troy's hearing a full month after a local news station ran a piece called "Toxic Jewelry and Boutique Hotels, When History Turns Hostile." My article got a mention, quoted without my name. I kept it that way on purpose. I like walking Alice to school without a camera on my shoulder. Stella didn't say anything about the segment. She just made one quiet phone call to a pro bono tenants firm she'd used for another property years back. Wired the retainer, then let Ms. Delgado handle the press and the paperwork. She never stepped in front of the mic. That's something I respect. Wealth used like scaffolding, not a parade float. At our next building meeting, we had more chairs than people. But Reggie from 2A came in hot, said the back stairwell didn't meet current code, and he'd filed a complaint with the inspection office. That triggered a site visit 2 days later. One crack in the fire escape permit, and the city froze Troy's renovation work. No bricks, no saws, no lobby demo. Nothing. People think battles like this are loud. They're not. They're slow, cold, won in folders, not fists. Tiana called me that night through a blocked number. I answered because I already knew it was her. She said, "Can we meet like adults?" I said, "You got 30 seconds. I have a mutual non-disparagement agreement ready for signature, and a personal statement you can use in court saying you may have misremembered events." I stood in my kitchen staring at the shawl on the chair. "You think I'm signing away my wife?" I asked. She didn't pause. "I think you're making this bigger than it is." I didn't say what I was thinking. I just hung up. She never called again. Meanwhile, Nelson had another angle working. Braxton. He wired him up, gave him a short script, and dropped him into a South Philly bar where the music's loud enough to blur confessions. Braxton sat down across from Troy, ordered a drink, and started talking about the necklace working on Stella. Troy didn't flinch. He said, "You'll get the rest when it's quiet." I reviewed the audio with Nelson the next morning. The timestamps, the background chatter, every syllable clean. Troy didn't know he'd already dug the hole and handed us the shovel. At the same time, the city ethics office opened a separate investigation. Possible payments to an inspector related to a different property Troy flipped 5 years back. That wasn't our case, but pressure's pressure. And men like Troy, they can handle a war in one room, not two. That week the noise came to our door. First it was a flat tire. Next day, another. Then someone left a dead fish in a takeout bag on our stoop. Anonymous online reviews popped up saying I was an abusive father, a drunk, a fake vet. Didn't matter that none of it stuck. The point was smoke. When that happens, you don't react. You document. One of the neighbors installed a motion cam near the entrance. I logged each incident, filed a report, didn't raise my voice, just watched. I adjusted my routines the way I used to downrange, different walking routes, eyes up at corners, never park in the same spot twice. It wasn't drama. It was protocol. Stella moved out of the hospital and into a serviced apartment about 10 blocks away. Full-time doorman, lobby camera on every angle. Her name wasn't listed on the buzzer. Braxton violated bond by texting her through a mutual friend. Just a few words, but enough to trigger emotion. He spent the night in a cell, and Stella's lawyer had the receipts printed before sunrise. I kept working shifts, night runs mostly. Calls that came in after 10 and left your shoes sticky. One kid overdosed in a dorm shower. One elderly woman passed in her sleep and left behind a parrot that wouldn't stop yelling, "Call 911." In between runs, I kept writing. Quiet articles, case notes with no names, small pieces about chemical exposure, vintage materials, what collectors should watch for. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to make the next predator think twice. Alice liked blueberry pancakes, so I made them almost every morning. Too many berries, half burned. She'd scrape the black off with her fork and say, "Dad, you need training." Then eat the whole thing with syrup. Every day we stayed in rhythm felt like armor. Stella and I had coffee on Wednesdays. Just coffee. No grand speeches. We talked about sock preferences, the best walking routes downtown, which bakery's bagels weren't cardboard. We never talked about the case. We never said the word love. Didn't need to. She wore plain earrings now. No necklace. Kept things simple. Once she said, "I don't feel like myself yet." I said, "That's normal. You're not who you were. You're who made it through. She didn't argue. Some nights after Alice went to bed, I'd stand on the balcony with the lavender shawl folded over the chair, not wearing it, just letting it be near. Below, the kitchen clatter and music from the bistro rolled up the bricks like memory. Forks against plates, bass lines under laughter, bottles cracked open like somebody meant it. I let the noise work on me, not because it comforted me, but because it meant things were still moving, still breathing. Different men have different prayers. Mine is simple: keep my kids safe, tell the truth, and let me be useful. The wire Braxton wore gave the DA more than expected. In 22 minutes of bar noise and low talk, Troy managed to call the necklace a tool, told Braxton to lay low until it cools, and mentioned a museum set that still needed finishing. The earrings and necklace, the pair, they weren't an accident. He practically read the indictment out loud, and still didn't notice he was stepping in cement. Tiana folded fast, showed up to the DA's office in a black coat, and brought a folder she'd handwritten like a ledger from a museum archive. Dates, item names, amounts paid. Her penmanship was irritatingly perfect. She told them Troy commissioned her to source conversation pieces. That's the phrase she used. And that he'd provided the materials to apply a patina. She said she didn't know it contained arsenic at first, said she panicked when she found out, and finished the job anyway, because she didn't want to lose everything she built. I've seen cleaner apologies from kids caught breaking a neighbor's window with a baseball. At least kids usually look sorry. Her cooperation bought her a deal: reduced exposure, some quiet probation, and a mountain of civil suits waiting on the other side. She lost 4 of her 5 main consignors within 48 hours. Auction houses don't wait for a court verdict. They close their books and pull your name from the catalog. Quiet punishment hits harder when it comes from the right rooms. The DA went public with the indictments after the grand jury finalized everything. Troy got conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, obstruction, and a handful of business license and zoning violations that will stick like burrs for years. Braxton took charges for attempted murder, conspiracy, and wire fraud connected to those bridge loans he tried to cover with Stella's signature. Nelson told me over the phone, "We're picking him up tomorrow at his office. You want to know when it's done?" I said, "Yeah, I do." The knock came around 9 the next morning. A uniform told me later that Troy opened the door in a Navy sport coat, smiled like he was at a cocktail hour, and said, "Can I freshen up first?" They told him no, cuffed him on the spot. That's the part I appreciated most. No speech, no grace notes, just the end. A week after that, the grand jury added another factor: aggravating. Vulnerable location. That's the formal term. Means the crime took place in a way that put bystanders at risk. I thought about the stairs Alice climbs, the lobby we walk through, the neighbor kids who pass by our door every day. That charge wasn't just legal, it was personal. Stella filed for divorce like she was signing a contract. Straightforward, quiet, surgical. She had a prenup, but survival changes the math. Braxton's lawyer tried the angle. She doesn't need the money, she's already wealthy. The judge gave him a stare that said, "Try that again and see where it lands." I watched the hearing from the hallway. Never went inside. Just wanted to know she was handling it her way. The cameras came back after the indictment. News crews posted up outside our building with tripods, flashbulbs, and mics full of dumb questions. One of them shouted, "Are you the man who solved the jewelry murder?" I left out the service alley and walked Alice through the back courtyard. She held my hand tighter than usual. Fame is a bad blanket. Never keeps you warm, never lasts through the night. Nelson and I met 2 days later. Same bench near the river we'd used once before, right where the trees lean out like they're trying to eavesdrop. He brought coffee, black and burned. Sat down like he didn't weigh much anymore. He said, "I don't usually get to deliver good packages." He meant the kind of closure you can write in a final report, but he also meant the Troy case he missed all those years ago, the one where he couldn't get the fire code violations to stick. This was the knot he untied finally. I told him straight, "You kept going. That's what matters." He nodded once like a soldier after orders, then said, "You kept the freezer bag." We both laughed a little. That's as close as men like us get to a hug. We didn't rush it. Same weekly coffee, same little table. Alice between us with her sneakers swinging. We went to the Science Museum on a Saturday, and then to the park where the swings squeaked like bad brakes. That was the first time I looked over and realized we fit in the same frame, the three of us. No staging, no effort. 14 months after the night on the balcony, we stood in a courthouse on a Wednesday morning. Stella wore flats and no makeup. I wore the same shirt I wore to my EMT licensing test. We said the short vows, signed our names, and walked 2 blocks to a diner that does soup and fresh bread. No first dance, no photographer, just relief and a kind of quiet joy that stayed warm and steady. Alice was 9 by then, taller, calmer, not grown, but solid in a way she hadn't been a year ago. In the car on the way home, she asked, "Can I call her Mom now?" Stella looked at me like she wasn't sure if she should answer. I nodded. "If you want to," she told Alice. My girl said, "I do," clean and proud, like she'd been waiting for the moment to come into focus. I kept my eyes on the traffic light. Didn't trust myself to speak until we hit green. The DA got Braxton to take the plea. Years in state. No early exit. With Tiana's ledgers and the wire, there was no daylight left to argue. He folded fast and went quiet even faster. Troy fought it harder. He always thought he could outwait a fire. But public heat doesn't cool when your name trends. He lost bail, then started selling off bars to fund his lawyers. One by one, his permits got frozen, his assets leaned, his name stripped off things that used to carry it in big letters. The building hearing came back around just as spring turned the streets slushy. I wore the same jacket I wore to Joseph's funeral and stood by the mic while Ms. Delgado read the petition. She cried near the end, tried to keep talking. I don't mind admitting my shoulders dropped an inch I didn't know I was still carrying. The board voted 3-2. No hotel. No conversion. They cited egress and community impact. We walked home with our hands in our coat pockets and a folder full of signatures. A few weeks later, the court released the clean earrings. They went on long-term loan to a small museum uptown. The curator made a tasteful label. No gore, no courtroom drama, just a simple line. Artifact once misused in a high-profile criminal case, now preserved in its original form. The necklace stayed in evidence where it belonged. I kept a full-color print of the lab report and tucked it into the professor's gray file box next to the pension letters and the funeral card. That column I wrote, about toxic heirlooms, kept spreading. A trade group emailed asking if I'd do a question and answer session. I said I would, if they cut a check to a first responder charity. Stella matched the donation quietly through her own channel. Never said a word about it. Alice drew a picture of our building with a big green shield over the roof. I stuck it next to a math test on the fridge, a 94, circled in purple. She's steadier than I ever was at her age. Tiana closed her showroom. She took a plea deal that kept her out of prison but left her name sitting under a rock. She never got the gallery invites back. Never got the Whisper Network referrals. That's justice in the category that counts, when the doors don't open anymore. I started sleeping more than 5 hours a night. Not always, not perfect, but often enough to call it a trend. I don't wait for someone else to count my wins anymore. I count them myself. One evening after dinner, I brought the lavender shawl down from the top shelf, gave it to Stella to feel. She held it gentle, like it was something fragile and alive. Ran her fingers over the seam where the residue had been. She was loved, she said. I looked at her hands holding the cloth. Then I said, she still is. We didn't throw a party when Stella told us. She just set it at the kitchen table with her hands folded around a tea mug like she didn't want to drop it. I'm pregnant. Alice covered her mouth and made a sound that was half laugh, half cry. She leaned forward and grabbed Stella's arm like she needed proof. Then the happy kind of sobs came. the kind that shake a kid from the chest out. I put my hand on the table, palm down, just to feel something solid. There's a part of me that's still standing on that sidewalk in a suit jacket, sweat in my collar, turning around and realizing the necklace was gone. That picture lives in my head on a higher shelf now. I don't open it much, but I don't bury it either. Revenge didn't come with sirens or speeches. It was quieter. Sitting in front of the city housing board with a binder full of lab reports and saying, "Pretty things can be dangerous." It was telling a reporter that a building is a home before it's a business. It was standing beside Ms. Delgado when they voted Troy down, watching her squeeze that red folder until her knuckles turned white. It was walking Stella into a courtroom with a file under her arm, hearing the judge stamp her divorce decree, and walking her back out again while the door clicked shut like a punctuation mark. Nelson sent me a text after the final verdicts came in. Not all cases end. This one did. No emojis, no exclamation points, just fact. I texted back, "You did your job." He replied, "So did you." I stared at that for a while. Didn't argue. Braxton's final letter came through his lawyer. 4 paragraphs of sorry, none of them with weight. No ownership, just soft cushions of regret typed by someone else's hand. Stella didn't reply. She started a scholarship fund for EMT training in her mother's name instead. That's how you flip a story. That's how you finish a chapter without lighting the book on fire. Troy's bars folded like cardboard. The liquor licenses dried up. The permits got revoked. The investors walked. The bistro downstairs changed owners. The new name's up in simple block letters. The kitchen still plays music, but it sounds different now. Lighter. Could be me. Could be the walls finally breathing easy again. I still carry gloves in my pocket and a flat evidence pouch in my backpack. Not out of fear, out of memory. You don't live through poison and forget to check your own skin. Alice teases me about it sometimes. "Dad," she said one night, "am I still allowed to go to space?" I told her, "You can go wherever you want if you keep your feet steady first." Some nights I narrate the whole thing to myself, like a voiceover no one asked for, just to keep it sharp. I don't let myself change the words or sand down the rough edges. When I get to the parts I didn't see with my own eyes, I replay the depositions, the lab slides, the wiretapes. That's enough. We had cake on a Tuesday night after spaghetti. Nothing fancy, just 3 slices on chipped plates. No candles, no speeches. Stella got up to do dishes and touched my elbow in passing. I watched her rinse a pan like it was the most normal thing in the world. From the living room, Alice called out, "Mom, can I have another piece?" She didn't think about it, didn't pause. That was the moment. Not the courtroom, not the hospital. That. Only a Tuesday night. Just a family. Life choosing to stick around. Before you head out, let me put something on your mind for a moment. If you were in Stanley's place, carrying all that truth and trying to build a steady life again, what choice would you have made when the past finally knocked back? And hey, if you've got the hype feature, please tap it to help this story reach more people. Make sure to subscribe and drop a like. It's just one click and it means a lot. And leave a comment, even a simple good story or your own take. Love you guys.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.